Hello everyone, this is Mohammad Nasim Firdaus and I will be here to narrate this PowerPoint presentation which is on the components of a language. And the information here was gathered from George Yule, Charles Mayer and other research articles and internet sources. And of course it was designed and structured by me, and this particular topic, the components of a language, will help you to understand the structure or the elements of a language. You will have proper knowledge on how a language elements, how the elements of a language works together to give you proper meaning, which we call a language. In other slide presentations, I have talked about the origins of language. I also talked about the features of language. Now, the components of a language will help you to go through all the elements of a language in order to understand you how these components work together to produce a meaningful expression among the human being. And I also would like to add more things. The components here will have very good connection with the topics to come. So if you listen and understand this particular slide very carefully, then this will help you to understand the later topics which are embedded in this particular course, Introduction to Linguistics. So I believe you will have close connection and close concentration on this particular slide. So let's get started. This is our contents for today's presentation, today's class. The first one is language components. We will be identifying the components, and these are the components we will be disclose in this particular slides. And last of all, we will be looking at the process of the language. So these are the components we'll be going one by one. Then this particular slide presentation will end with the discussion of the processing of a language. So let's start with the first one, language components. Language components based on these 5 basic components. First one is phonology, second one is morphology, and then syntax, then semantics, and last of all, pragmatics. These 5 basic major components constitute a language. Or in other way, you can say that if you analyze any language, you will find these 5 basic components there. And we will have to understand these components because language acquisition progresses across these components with increasing quantity of the sounds, words, and the length of the sentences. And these will gradual refinement and understanding of the subtler and more complex points of uses, and that is using taught rather than teased. So this complex structure will be identified and explored by gathering information on these language components. So in other words, if you have proper knowledge on these components, it will be very helpful for you to understand any language. That will lead you to learn a language more comfortably. For example, if you want to learn English language and if you have proper idea on these components of English language, like phonology, English phonology, and the English morphology, and the structure of English language, English sentences, and the meanings used in English language, and the language used, that means in context. This will help you to learn English language in a better way. You will be able to identify the structures, the complex points like this one. So let's go with these components. The first one is phonology. Phonology is the study of the sounds, and by saying these sounds, we are not talking about the sounds produced by other sources. For example, I'm clapping, so this is a sound of clapping, and maybe some kind of horns from different transports. So we are not talking about those sounds, we are talking about speech sounds. So the question is, what is speech sound? Speech sound refers the sounds which are produced by our speech organs. And what do we refer by speech organs? Speech organs like, if you consider here the person, and we will have our nose and our lips and then teeth in there, and in other part we will have our tongue and other organs which will help you to understand. Sorry for this drawing. I know I'm not I'm not good at drawing, but definitely I will show you the parts, the speech organs, which are which are necessary to produce speech sounds. So I am talking about those speech sounds, those actual sounds that come out of our mouths, and those are called as phones. So if you look any sound, if you go with any language, then you will find these phones, the basic sounds. And the smallest units of sounds, by saying smallest units of sounds, we are going with the meaning. The sounds which give you which will mean something in a language are or will be represented as phonemes. So these will be for the basic sounds, and these will be for the sounds in a language. So these two things are different. So one is all about the sounds only. In this section we will be talking about only sounds. For example, in Bangla and English we have pass sound. In Bangla language we have pass sound, in English we have pass sound. But the way we use pass sound in Bangla might not be the same the way we will use pass sound in English language. So that's how these sounds will be different. But the properties of pass sound is similar in both Bangla and English, but the organization of pass sounds will be different based on the languages, based on for example, Bangla language will have different organization and English language will have different organization. So ultimately, phonology deals with the sounds, yes, that's fine, but these sounds has two wings. One is the production of speech sounds, how we will produce the sounds. For example, if we want to produce a pass sound, we need to close our lips together, and then we need to release our air abruptly. That's how we will be able to produce pass sound. So in this section, that means under phonetics, we will be trying to identify how the sounds are produced. But under phonology, we will be looking at the organization of the sounds. For example, in the sound unit pen, we have three different sounds: pa sound, e sound, and na sounds. These three sounds together compose a unit of sound pen, and that's how this organization will be identified and studied under phonology. But ultimately, this particular section will be studying sounds. And let's have more issues, like no two languages use exactly the same shape. That's what we said whenever we gave the example of Bangla and English language. We say that yes, they're different. No language makes use of all the sounds the human speech organs can produce. 7 billion people, 700 yes, 7 billion people over the are living at this moment all over the world, and those 7 billion people produce 100 to 150 sounds, but no human speech organs, I mean all the sounds are produced by there, but no language use all the sounds altogether. For example, American English use only 38 to 48 sounds, British English produce only 38 to 48 sounds out of these 100 to 150 sounds. That's why there will be difficulty when one particular language user will try to learn or use another language. For example, in this particular two words in English language, full and poor, though this later organization are pretty much same, but still this will sound different whenever one foreign language learner uses or apply these particular sounds. And there are variation, of course there are variation across languages. We have a British accent and then American accent, and then you will find that though often, and for example in British sound you will find often, though some of the British use often as well, and in English, that means in American English, you will find this particular sign often. So often versus often, so this variation you will find across languages. And that's why in order to identify these sounds, so the phoneticians altogether produce this particular section, that is IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet. And by understanding this phonetic alphabet, one person can identify and understand any particular sound. He or she will be able to produce the sounds across languages. So, he or she will understand and how the sounds can be produced or should be produced. Next, coming here, morphology. Morphology is section with this like morph plus ology. Like here we'll be talking about morph, and here is ology. Ology refers to the science of science. The science of what? Science of morph, and morph refers as the word structures, because sound patterns in language cannot explain the structure of words. Yes, they are only with the sounds, but whenever we will be talking about the words, that is more likely in the written format, and in the written format those sound patterns cannot explain the structure of words. How the words are structured cannot be explained in there. So that's why morphology works with the study of word formation, how word forms together and produce a meaning in there. So morphology focuses on the internal structure of words. So here morphology analyzes the existing words, and it also explains the new words which are produced. And whenever we'll be trying to analyze the smallest unit of a word, then that will help to identify the linguistic meaning or function, which is considered as a morpheme. So morpheme is the smallest unit of linguistic meaning or function. That means in order to become a morpheme, that particular section or segment needs to be, number one, smallest, number two, should have linguistic meaning or linguistic function in there. So these will be the functions in there. And these morphemes has two sections, two basic sections. One is free and another is bound morpheme. And this free morpheme will have another two sections, and there is lexical and functional. And then the bound morpheme will have this inflectional and derivational function. I said earlier that we will have more specific class on morphology, phonology, and the other components. So don't worry in the, but you need to have this basic idea of morphemes. If you have this basic idea, this will help you to go through to understand morphology in detail. So this is what we are talking about. For example, in friendly, it has two morphemes. One is friend and another one is Lee. Friend is a free morpheme because it can be existed without the help of any other morphemes or any other morphological units. But here in Ly, it will have no meaning or function if it stays separately. That's why it is referred as a bound morpheme. So there are lots of words in there. So if they can stay separately, then we can call it as a free morpheme. If they cannot, then we can consider as bound morpheme. So knowledge of the morphology of a language is critical to vocabulary development. If you want to learn a language, you need to have proper idea on the morphology, because this will give you some critical information on the vocabulary development, and which would reflect the smallest building blocks for comprehension. So if you don't understand a word, you cannot produce meaning of a sentence. So talking about the sentence, let's hear it. Syntax. Syntax is all about the study of sentence and sentence structure. By saying sentence and sentence structure, it's all about the organization of the words. Because according to you, when we concentrate on the structure and ordering of components within a sentence, we are studying the syntax of a language. In order to study the sentence structure of language, we need to concentrate the structure and the order of the components. And by saying components, we are referring the morpheme or morphological units. So the study of how individual words and their most basic meaningful units are combined to create sentences is referred under syntax. So under syntax, we'll be referring these individual words and their basic meaningful units. So the study of sentence structure is what we call as syntax. That's what we are talking about in the previous as minutes. So under syntax, it will be relating with the grammar. That means grammatical items. For example, that could be voice, that could be narration, that could be sentences. So those other grammatical identities will be referred under syntax. So phrases, clauses will be there. So but of course there are certain word order to have grammatical correct sentences, though this word order can be varied according to the language, according to different languages. For example, under English language, we will have this one: subject verb plus verb plus object. But if we had Bangla language, then we would not have this kind of structure. We would have subject plus object plus verb. So this would be the structure in Bangla language, but still it is the structure. So under syntax, we will be having this particular structures. In English, we will have these structures. In Bangla, we will have these structures. Okay. So different order and levels of complexity, but same meaning. Yes, by gathering information on syntax, you will be able to understand the word order and the complexity level. Because look at these two sentences: the boy hit the ball, the ball was hit by the boy. So if you look closely, even if you look very in a very gentle way, you can easily identify that these two sentences look different. But if we want to go through the meaning, we can understand that these two sentences are pretty much similar. So this particular study of syntax allows us to accept I went to store as a meaningful sentence. I went to store, so definitely it follows this order: subject, verb and object. So definitely it gives you the meaning. But if the order changes, then this will not be acceptable in English. For example, to store went I. So you know that the structure changed, and this might not give you proper meaning, and this is not acceptable in English language. So so syntax will give these kinds of study, but still it has limitation, because there are some structural ambiguity, because if we follow the rules, sometimes it may puzzle you. For example, if we look closely in this particular sentence only. Please forget about these two sentences. Look closely in this sentence. I saw an English teacher walking on the field. This particular sentence might have two different meanings. One, I saw a teacher who teaches English walking on the field. So this could be one sentence. So we are referring the teacher who teaches English. That's why it is referred as English teacher. Another could be I saw a teacher from England walking in the field. That means the teacher could be teaching math, could be teaching music, could be teaching art, but she or she could be coming from England. That's why it could be referring as English. So I saw a teacher from England who comes from England working on the field. So these two different meanings could be identified, could be understood by this particular only one sentence. So this could be very ambiguous. So these are structural ambiguity can be identified in there, and this one kind of limitation of syntax. So we came to this point, that is semantics. Semantics refers the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences. So by referring semantics, the semantics studies the meaning. So meaning of all words and phrases and sentences. It is an attempt to focus on what the words conventionally mean rather than on what an individual speaker wanted to mean. Any particular language or any particular words could have different meaning in terms of its use. But under semantics, it will look only the conventional meaning. It will refer only the world meaning, the dictionary meaning in there. In linguistic, semantics is more concerned with the trying to analyze the conceptual meaning. What the basic concept in there? What's the surface meaning in there? So, and those surface meaning will cover the basic essential components of meaning that are conveyed by the literal use of a word. So that will be literally used. For example, the surface meaning of any particular word. For example, in this word, we will be trying to identify the meaning of word. So, for example, a word that means one word. So, literal meaning in there. And definitely, for example, in needle in English is referred as a thin, sharp steel instrument. So by referring as needle, we are referring as thin, sharp and steel instrument, and that is what we are referring as a conceptual meaning. But there could be other meaning as well. For example, needle could mean as injection for the nurses, for the doctors. But in layman meaning, in dictionary meaning, needle comes with with an object which is thin, which is sharp, and which is made of steel. And if we are referring as the conceptual meaning, we are referring this kind of meaning. But if we refer as associative meaning, we will be referring as injection by different doctors or nurses in there. But those associative meaning will not be worked under semantics. And another thing that is very interesting as well, if we look at it here, all kings are male versus all kings are female. So how come it happens? Look at the sentences. You can closely identify how this thing works. Whenever I refer kings, you know that with the word kings, I cannot produce or refer male in there or not. Yes, I can produce male in there, but if we produce kings, we cannot say female, because kings has the affiliation with the male figure. It is not female figure. If I want to write female, then I should have written queen in there. All queens are female. So this is what we are meaning in there. The cow flies in the sky. This is a grammatical correct sentences, but we know cows cannot fly, but the birds can. So we cannot say cows flies in the skies, but if we say the birds fly in the sky is correct, because the affiliation with fly doesn't go with the curves but with the birds. So that's why this particular section is correct, whether it is not. this particular section is correct, this is not, because of semantics. Semantics gives you the meaning, which words need to stay where. So this is the final segment, but definitely it's not the it's not the last one. We cannot overlook the importance of pragmatics. Rather, it is far much valuable than the others. Other four components, phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics, are mostly based on the language structure. But here in pragmatics, it is more focused on language use rather than language structure, because pragmatics affects by because any language affects by context. If we want to study a language, we cannot skip the existence of context. Context refers of what? We will come to this in later section. But pragmatics refers to the ways the members of the speech community achieve their goals using language. So by by having knowledge on pragmatics, the language users or the members of the speech community, they achieve their goals. The goals of what? The goals to communicate. If you don't have any knowledge on pragmatics, you might have failed communication. So in order to have the meaning, proper meaning, what the speakers want to mean, you need to have knowledge on pragmatics. According to Yule, communication clearly depends on not only recognizing the meaning of words in an utterance, but recognizing what speakers mean by their utterances. So, in utterances is the oral format of sentences. The sentence what we refer is the written format, and the same thing when you deliver through your oral cavity, we consider it as an utterance. And in these utterances, we are not we cannot focus only the recognition of the meaning, but we have to understand what the speakers want to mean. And pragmatics mostly focus on the speaker's meaning rather than on the general meaning of this one. So you know the meaning of the word clear, but if the particular speaker means differently by referring this word clear, you need to understand that. If you don't understand that, that means you don't have this pragmatical knowledge. That means you will have failed communication with with that language user. So that's what we are referring. Only meaning will not be enough if we don't know how to use or when to use. We need to understand when to use this language. So the intended meaning is what we are looking for under pragmatics. For example, pass the salt. Pass the salt refers that it is you need to have this one. That means, and one person is referring to giving you instruction about passing the salt, and this is an instruction, you know what does it mean. And in another one, will you please pass the salt, gives you the same meaning but in different way. But if you look closely about these two sentences, you will identify that we cannot use this word in every situation. For example, if I have my seniors, I cannot say this sentence because this particular sentence will give you order. So I cannot tell my father or mother pass the salt. Rather than I can request. I can request by saying that will you please pass the salt. So by saying that, of course, there are another meaning as well. Whenever I will be saying that, will you please pass the salt, or can you pass the salt. So but if you refer that can you pass the salt, it means it wants the ability. If you go through the sentence, it will be referring as the ability by referring as the can. But you know what does it mean, what the speaker wants to mean. The speaker uh, doesn't want your ability, but he wants you to pass the salt. So this particular understanding will be referred under pragmatics. And a language user needs the knowledge of the language, the culture, and the people in order to perform well in this area. So if you want to learn English language, definitely you want to have knowledge of the language, the culture, and the people. For example, if if a person, if an inhabitant from America, he wants to learn Bangla language, he or she has to have knowledge on this particular language, the culture and the people. uh, I would like to give you an example. Like, we have three different pronouns to refer you: tui, tumi and apni. So if you don't have the knowledge of the language and the culture, you cannot use these different three pronouns. You will have difficulties in your daily life, which will create problem in communicating with the others. And the variables definitely refer on the context, on the relationship and the contextual meaning. So from when are you talking, what is the situation in there, what are the relationships between you and your or and your uh, language partner, and the contextual meaning, what does it mean in that particular context. So that particular word or particular format or objects might have different meaning. So how the process of language is related with these components of a language. These components will refer the mechanism of a language. So a language mechanism can be understandable by identifying the components. It is hard to adapt a language without adapting the components consciously or subconsciously. For example, you have subconscious knowledge on Bangla language as a Bangla language speaker, so you don't have any problem using using Bangla language. But if you don't have knowledge, for example, conscious or subconscious knowledge on English language, you will find difficulty to adapt English language. And all these components need to work simultaneously to have successful communication in a language. If any of those component and doesn't work or misfunction, and that might lead to misinterpretation or unsuccessful communication, and the listener might have different kind of meaning. They might have unsuccessful communication if any of the things doesn't work. For example, if phonetics doesn't work, if morphology doesn't work, or if maybe semantics doesn't work, that will give you different kind of meaning or understanding. So it will be a failure communication if any of these things misfunctions or becomes non-existent. And the reference were uses from the textbook, which is referred to Study of Language by George Yule, and another one is Introducing English Linguistics International Student Edition by May. Charles May, that is Cambridge University Press, and other different sources and the articles are there. So if you need the sources, definitely you can find it. So questions, time for the questions, but not here because this is a one-way communication. So but you have forum, so please do join in the forum to ask queries, to have your opinions. Please do join here there. So thank you very much for being here, for listening closely, concentrate hard on this particular presentation, on this particular slides, on this particular lecture. So I hope you have understood well, but still if you have any question, please do join in the forum. We will be having discussion on there. Thank you very much.